On a cold Friday night in Chicago, while most people were finishing dinner and getting ready for the weekend, 26-year-old Jake Thompson was driving through heavy traffic with a stack of pizza boxes sitting in the passenger seat of his old Honda, wondering how his life had gone so wrong. He wasn't supposed to be here. At least, that wasn't what he had imagined when he graduated high school. Like millions of people, Jake believed that by his mid-20s, he would have a stable career, a decent house, and enough money to stop worrying about bills every month. Instead, he was making deliveries for $12 an hour, carrying nearly $80,000 in debt, living in a tiny apartment, and watching everyone around him seem to move forward while he felt trapped in place. Every night he would come home exhausted, throw his keys on the table, and stare at the ceiling, wondering whether this was all life had to offer. And perhaps the most painful part wasn't that he was broke. It was the feeling that he had somehow wasted his potential. Because deep down, Jake didn't hate hard work. He hated the idea that he was trading all of his time just to survive. Then, one night, something happened that changed everything. He delivered 3 pizzas to a large office building just before midnight. As he handed the order to the receptionist, he noticed that dozens of employees were still working. People looked exhausted. Coffee cups were everywhere. Empty snack wrappers covered the desks. And one thought immediately entered his mind. If these people are working this late every single night, who is making sure they have food, drinks, and supplies? At first, it seemed like a stupid question. But sometimes life changes because of simple questions that everyone else ignores. Over the next few weeks, Jake started paying attention. Every time he made deliveries to offices, warehouses, and small businesses, he noticed the same thing. Employees were constantly ordering food, coffee, and snacks, and managers were wasting hours trying to organize everything themselves. And slowly, an idea began to form. What if companies could subscribe to a service that automatically stocked their offices with snacks, drinks, coffee, and supplies without having to think about it? The idea sounded simple, too simple, which is exactly why nobody took him seriously. His friends laughed. His family told him to focus on finding a real career. His coworkers thought he was dreaming. And even Jake himself wasn't sure whether he was building a business or just wasting his time. But every night after finishing his pizza deliveries, instead of going home and watching television, he would spend hours researching suppliers, designing flyers, and visiting local businesses asking for 5 minutes of their time. Most people rejected him. Some didn't even let him finish his sentence. And after 3 months, he had made exactly $0. That's when most people quit. Not because they're lazy, but because they expect success to reward effort immediately. And life doesn't work that way. Success rewards patience long before it rewards talent. Then one afternoon, after hearing no hundreds of times, a small law firm agreed to give him a chance. The contract was worth only $600 a month, hardly life-changing. But to Jake, it felt like he had just signed a billion-dollar deal. Because that first customer gave him something far more valuable than money. Proof. And once he had proof, everything changed. 1 customer became 3. 3 became 10. 10 became 30. Soon, Jake was earning more from his side business than he was making delivering pizzas. But instead of celebrating, he made a decision that most people would never understand. He kept delivering pizzas. Not because he loved it, but because he understood something that many people never learn. Desperation makes people make stupid decisions. And cash flow buys patience. So while his business grew, his pizza job paid the bills. For almost 2 years, Jake lived a double life. During the day, he met clients. At night, he delivered pizzas. And after midnight, he worked on his business until he fell asleep on his laptop. It wasn't glamorous. Nobody was calling him a genius. Nobody was interviewing him. And nobody believed he was building something extraordinary. Then, one day, A regional company with more than 500 employees called him. They wanted his service in all of their offices. That contract alone generated more revenue than everything he had earned during the previous year combined. And suddenly, the business exploded. Within 5 years, Jake had expanded into multiple states. Within 10 years, his company was generating more than $100 million in annual revenue. Reporters called him an overnight success. But there was nothing overnight about it. Nobody saw the years of rejection. Nobody saw the nights he cried alone in his apartment, wondering if he was wasting his life. Nobody saw the debt, the fear, the uncertainty. People only saw the ending. Because that's what the world does. It celebrates victories, but ignores the price that victories demand. Years later, when Jake was asked what the biggest difference was between the broke pizza delivery driver and the businessman who owned a $100 million company, everyone expected him to talk about strategy, intelligence, or luck. But his answer surprised them. He said the biggest difference wasn't money, it wasn't education, and it wasn't connections. The biggest difference was that one version of himself was obsessed with making enough money to survive, while the other became obsessed with solving problems that other people were willing to pay to make disappear. Because wealth has never belonged to people who chase money. Wealth belongs to people who create value. And perhaps that's why some of the richest people in the world started with nothing. Not because they had special talents, but because being broke forced them to notice opportunities that comfortable people never see. After all, sometimes the greatest businesses aren't born inside fancy offices or billion-dollar corporations. Sometimes they begin inside an old Honda Civic, with a tired pizza delivery driver carrying boxes through the rain, completely unaware that one day, the same streets that reminded him of failure would become the streets where his dream began. Because success rarely arrives looking like success. Most of the time, it arrives disguised as struggle. And the people who learn to embrace that struggle are often the ones who end up changing their lives forever.